A campaign group called on Theresa May to show some Churchill spirit as they warned her proposals for a no-change transition period after Brexit Day on March 29, 2019, could destroy the British fishing fleet. Fishermen fear the Prime Minister will be tempted in talks with Brussels to sacrifice their industry in exchange for EU concessions on bigger sectors. Mrs May has said Britain will leave the Common Fisheries Policy CFP on March 29 next year, but cannot introduce its own newer arrangements until after the implementation period of about 2 years she wants after exit day. The Fishing for Leave group says this would mean Britain having to stick to EU fish quota rules during the transition, but with no say over them, as it will officially be outside the UK. Getty British fishermen want the government to take back full control over the UK's fishing grounds. The UK will be trapped. Alan Hastings. The UK would also have to stick to the terms of deals made by the EU with non-European countries like Norway and Iceland. But those non-EU countries would not be bound by the UK-EU transition deal and therefore would not be under any obligations to the UK once it is outside the EU, the pro-Brexit group believes. In a catch-22 situation, Britain could not conclude its own new deals with the non-Europeans until the transition ends. The group said, rather than leaving cleanly and being free to operate as an independent sovereign nation, the transition digs this country into a subservient position with no guarantee of being party to any international agreements through the EU. It warned the arrangement will mean Britain staying in the CFP in all but name, bound by the quotas the EU sets each December of different fish that UK and rival fleets can catch in UK waters. Getty fishermen fear the Prime Minister will be tempted in talks with Brussels to sacrifice their industry. It would also lock British boats into the EU's proposed bans on discarding fish back into the sea if they exceed the fishermen's quota. UK fishermen say that would stop them fishing for the year once they caught up to the limit of their smallest quota, for fear of netting more of that type of fish while pursuing the other species they still have quota for. Fishing for Leave said official forecasts show that would bankrupt 60% of the UK fleet, in a final insult that would see foreign boats allowed to claim the fish in British waters under international law for when a country does not have the capacity to harvest its own stocks. Group leader Alan Hastings said a transition means British fishermen are staring down the barrel of a gun. Monday, March 20, 2017, under the auspices of the proposed transition deal, more an edict to obey, the UK will be trapped in the CFP, where our fishing industry will be culled to make way for the EU fleet, whilst also losing any access to Faroe and Norway, which will diminish fishing opportunities further. If we're not at the table, the EU can enforce whatever policy they want. It is nearly unbelievable that the political establishment could contemplate locking the fifth most powerful nation in the world into such a subservient position, especially against the expressed wish of the British people to leave the EU in its entirety, as voted for in the biggest vote in British history. We need to be out of the CFP next year, or the British fishing industry will be consigned to history. Get Michael Gove's father was a fisherman. The EU are defending the interests of the 27 members. It's time for the UK government to wake up and defend our national interests. It's time for Theresa May to show some Churchill spirit. Environment Secretary Michael Gove, whose father was a fisherman, and Fishing Minister George Eustace, who both supported Brexit, have voiced the support for the industry's concerns. But fishermen fear other ministers are less sympathetic. Mike Park, head of the Scottish Whitefish Producers Association, warned people are looking for fishermen to get a good deal from Brexit. If we've been sold down the river, that doesn't bode well.